She had no one to help after the flood. Cowboy sailed with a raft and said, "We salvage what we can." The morning started like any other, with a soft gray light slipping through the thin curtains of Maya's small bedroom. She stirred awake, blinking against the dim sunlight, expecting to see her quiet little street, lined with neat houses and blooming gardens. But today, something felt different. The air was thick and damp, heavy with the smell of wet earth. And then she heard it, a strange, powerful sound that made her heart skip a beat. It wasn't birds or the faint hum of cars. It was the sound of rushing water, a deep, angry roar that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Maya sat up quickly, her bare feet touching the cool wooden floor. At first, she thought it was just a storm outside. The weather had been bad for several days, with heavy rain falling without pause, but she had never imagined anything like this. She rushed to the window and pulled aside the curtain. Her breath caught in her throat. The street that she knew so well was gone. Water had surged over the curbs and into the yards, filling the space between the houses. What had once been her familiar neighborhood was now a swirling river, moving fast and carrying everything it touched. Panic rose in her chest. She ran to the front door, hoping to step outside and assess the situation, but the water was already waist-high, pressing against the door like a wall. She pressed her hand against it, feeling the cold, relentless force of the flood. Her mind raced. She remembered the news warnings about heavy rain, about rivers rising. But she had never imagined it would come to this, that the water would reach her home so quickly and with so much strength. She was alone. Her parents were away visiting relatives, and the neighbors she usually saw every day were nowhere in sight. The reality hit her hard. She had no one to turn to, no immediate help, and no way to escape the water on her own. Maya's mind shifted from the fear to action. She ran through her house, grabbing what she could. Her hands shook as she tried to hold on to anything valuable, anything she couldn't live without. She scooped up her laptop, a few clothes, some important documents, and a small box of photographs. The pictures were of her family, friends, and memories she cherished, moments frozen in time that she refused to lose. Desque. She moved quickly, knowing the water was rising faster than she could anticipate. She climbed to the second floor, her heart pounding in her chest. The stairs were slippery and dangerous, but she forced herself upward, guided by instinct and sheer determination. When she reached the top, she looked out the window again. The river that had once been gentle and calm, winding behind her house, had become a wild, unstoppable force. Trees and debris floated past, crashing into fences and cars, carried by the water's merciless current. It was terrifying, yet strangely mesmerizing, like watching nature in a form of raw, uncontrolled power. Maya realized that staying inside would not be safe for long. The water was creeping higher, and she needed a plan. She gathered blankets and pillows, stacking them near the window to create a small, safe space where she could sit above the rising flood. Desk! She tied a rope to a strong hook in the ceiling, thinking perhaps it could be used to help her climb or signal for help if someone came near. Every sound outside made her jump, the crack of a branch against the wall, the crash of a metal sheet floating by. Each moment was a reminder that she was alone, and that the flood was not waiting for anyone. Hours passed slowly. The rain continued, relentless and heavy, drumming on the roof like 1,000 tiny drums. Maya tried to stay calm, focusing on her breathing, counting in her head, and reminding herself to think clearly. She knew panic would not save her. Only careful, calm actions would. But it was hard. She watched the water swallow more of the neighborhood, taking fences, bikes, and parts of homes with it. She shouted for help, her voice breaking against the roar of the flood, but no one came. There was no sound of sirens, no boats, no rescue teams, just the water and her fear. As the morning turned to afternoon, Maya felt the loneliness of her situation most acutely. She thought about her family, wondering if they knew what was happening, if anyone would come for her. She thought about her neighbors, the people she had shared smiles and greetings with, now vanished beneath the flood. She realized how fragile life could be, how quickly everything familiar could disappear. Tears filled her eyes, but she wiped them away. She couldn't afford to give up, not yet. Survival required strength, and she would not let fear paralyze her. Patient, she moved from window to window, scanning for signs of life. Occasionally, she saw debris float by, but nothing human. She noticed a dog struggling against the current near one of the fences, and her heart ached. She wanted to help, but there was no way. The water was too strong, too dangerous. She shouted to the animal, hoping someone would hear, but it disappeared into the rush of the flood. It was a bitter reminder of how powerless she felt, trapped in a situation she could not control. As evening approached, the flood seemed to grow even more aggressive. The wind picked up, whipping the water into waves that slapped against her house. Maya's small, safe space felt less and less secure. She knew she had to stay vigilant. Every creak of the house, every new crack of wood under pressure, sent adrenaline surging through her veins. She clutched the rope she had tied earlier, imagining that it might be her lifeline if she needed to escape quickly. Her imagination ran wild with scenarios, some hopeful, some terrifying. She thought of swimming, of being carried away, of the house collapsing. Each thought was frightening, but she forced herself to remain focused on practical solutions rather than giving in to despair. Night fell, but the flood did not relent. Maya lit candles and tried to keep herself occupied, talking to herself quietly to maintain some sense of normalcy. She reminded herself of everything she had learned from survival guides she had read online, from stories of natural disasters. She reinforced her little pile of belongings, making sure the most important items were on higher ground. She kept the rope within reach and prepared mentally for whatever the night might bring. She listened to the sounds outside, the water, the wind, the occasional distant crash, and felt a strange combination of fear and awe at the power of nature. It was late when she finally allowed herself a moment of rest, leaning against the window frame and closing her eyes. But sleep was fleeting. Every noise jolted her awake. Every movement of the water kept her alert. She realized she was completely alone, with only her wits and courage to rely on. She thought about what tomorrow might bring. She didn't know if anyone would come for her, didn't know if the water would rise further or begin to recede. All she knew was that she had to stay strong, had to keep thinking, had to keep preparing. By the time the first light of a new day crept into the sky, Maya had made a plan. She would stay on the second floor as long as necessary, salvaging what she could and staying vigilant. She knew the flood might not last forever, but she also knew that survival depended on careful action and constant attention. She was determined, despite the fear, despite the loneliness, despite the overwhelming force of the water. She was determined to survive, to protect what she could, and to wait for help, however long it might take. Little did she know, her life was about to change in a way she could never have imagined. Someone was coming, someone who had the courage and skill to navigate the floodwaters, someone who would bring hope to her lonely and desperate world. But for now, she waited, alone but resolute, in the middle of a flood that had taken everything else from her. The roar of the water was deafening, but within that chaos, Maya discovered a quiet strength she hadn't known she possessed, a spark of determination that would carry her through the trials to come. Maya sat on the edge of her makeshift safe space, staring at the water that now surrounded her home completely. The flood had not let up overnight. In fact, it seemed to grow stronger, as if the river had decided to claim everything in its path, perhaps as heavy with fear, but she refused to let it take over. She thought about her family far away, unaware of what had happened, and she knew she had to survive until help came. best. She clutched the small box of photographs, her most precious possessions, and held it close. Every creak of the house, every slap of water against the walls, made her jump, but she remained alert. She was determined to face whatever came next, alone if necessary. Suddenly, through the mist and spray rising from the raging flood, she saw movement. At first, she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her, or perhaps it was just debris being carried by the current. But as she focused, she realized it was something, or someone, coming toward her. A figure floated down the street on what looked like a makeshift raft, navigating the water with ease. Maya's heart leapt.
Could it be a neighbor? A rescue worker?
She squinted, trying to make out details through the haze. The figure came closer, and she could see it more clearly now. It was a man, wearing a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face, a rugged coat and boots that had clearly seen years of hard work. His eyes were calm and focused, and his hands gripped a long wooden pole, which he used to steer the raft through the floating debris. Despite the chaos around him, the trees, broken fences, and floating furniture, he moved with confidence and skill, as if he belonged to the water rather than fearing it. Maya's fear mixed with a flicker of hope. Could this man help her? She didn't know, but she had no other choice. She called out, her voice trembling but loud enough to cut through the roar of the flood. Hello!
Can you help me? The man paused, looking directly at her. He tipped his hat slightly and shouted back over the sound of the water. Hold on!
I'll get you out. His voice was calm, steady, and carried a strange warmth, like someone who had faced many challenges and survived. The man guided his raft closer, carefully avoiding the large chunks of debris that could easily tip him over. Maya felt a rush of relief, but also nervousness. The water was unpredictable, and she had no idea how this encounter would end. She scanned the raft and noticed it was simple but sturdy, built for practicality rather than comfort. It had ropes and wooden planks tied together, enough to carry a person safely if the flood didn't get too rough. The man extended a rope toward her, throwing it with precision.
Grab it!
He shouted. Maya hesitated for a moment, her hands shaking. But she knew she had to act. She grabbed the rope and wrapped it around her arm, then pulled herself carefully toward the edge of the raft. The current was strong, tugging at her feet and threatening to unbalance her, but the man's steady hands guided her, holding the rope firmly and keeping the raft stable. With one final pull, she was safely aboard. The raft wobbled slightly, but it held, and Maya let out a long, shaky breath. She was no longer alone. The man gave her a small nod, a gesture of reassurance, and then shouted over the wind and water, "We salvage what we can!" Maya repeated the words in her mind, feeling a strange mixture of fear and curiosity. Salvage what we can! It wasn't a promise of complete safety, but it was a promise of action, of effort, and that was all she needed right now. The man's words carried a sense of determination, as if he was telling her that no matter what the flood had taken, they would try to save what mattered most. As they navigated the flooded street together, Maya took the opportunity to look at her rescuer more closely. There was something timeless about him, as if he belonged to another era, someone who had lived through countless storms and knew how to survive them. His hands were calloused, his face tanned and weathered, but his eyes were kind, filled with a quiet understanding. He moved the raft with precision, leaning with the waves, pushing away floating debris and avoiding dangerous currents. It was clear he had done this before, perhaps many times, and his experience gave Maya a sense of security she hadn't felt in hours. The floodwaters were unpredictable. One moment, they would drift smoothly, and the next a wave would hit with surprising force, sending the raft rocking violently. Maya held on tightly, her knuckles white, but she trusted the man. He gave her small instructions as they moved. "Lean left," he said when a large piece of wood came floating by. "Steady yourself," he warned when a wave crashed against the side of the raft.
Each instruction was simple but effective, and Maya realized that in this moment her survival depended on her ability to follow him.
As they continued, they passed houses partially submerged, cars floating like toys, and trees uprooted and drifting downstream. The sight was both terrifying and heartbreaking. Maya's neighborhood, once full of life, was now a landscape of chaos and destruction. Yet, despite the devastation, the man remained calm, his focus unwavering. He would steer the raft toward floating objects, not to take them for himself, but to clear the way and sometimes even to retrieve anything valuable that could be saved. Maya realized this was what he meant by salvage what we can, not just objects, but hope, life, and dignity in the face of disaster. At one point, they approached her house. The water was high, nearly reaching the roof of the first floor. Maya's heart sank. She thought of the photographs, the documents, and the small belongings she had managed to save.
"Can we get them?"
she asked, her voice tight with anxiety. The man nodded.
"Hold on."
"We'll try, but be careful."
They maneuvered the raft close to the edge of the house. Maya climbed onto the roof of the lower part of her home, gripping the rope the man had thrown to her.
The water lapped dangerously close, and she felt the cold shock of fear wash over her again.
Carefully, she climbed down to reach the small pile of belongings she had stacked for safety.
She grabbed the box of photographs and the few documents she could carry, holding them above her head to keep them dry. The man steadied the raft, ensuring it didn't drift away while she worked. As Maya climbed back onto the raft, she realized something important. In this moment of desperation, she had felt fear, loneliness, and helplessness. But now, with someone by her side, she felt courage, trust, and hope. The man's presence reminded her that even in the worst situations, help could come from unexpected places. She had been alone, but she was not alone anymore. They continued moving through the neighborhood, salvaging what they could from the floodwaters. The man guided the raft skillfully, avoiding hazards, retrieving small items that floated past, and always checking to make sure Maya was safe. He explained some of the dangers along the way, teaching her small lessons about the flood, how to read the water, how to avoid currents, and how to stay balanced on a raft. Maya absorbed everything, feeling her confidence grow with each passing moment. Braves. Hours passed, and the light began to change. The storm clouds were thinning, revealing glimpses of blue sky. The floodwaters were still high, but there was a sense that the worst might be over. Maya and the man paused near a small tree that had partially fallen but still stood in the water. She leaned against the raft, exhausted but grateful. "Thank you," she said quietly, feeling a surge of emotion. The man gave her a small smile, tipping his hat again. "We're not done yet," he replied.
"We salvage what we can." Maya realized that these words were more than just a promise to save belongings. They were a reminder to never give up, to keep fighting, and to hold on to hope even when circumstances seemed impossible.
She looked around at the flooded neighborhood, the chaos, and the floating debris, and she felt a strange sense of determination. She had faced fear alone, but now she had learned that courage could grow even in the presence of someone willing to help. As evening approached, they found a slightly higher area where the water was less strong. The man guided the raft toward it, allowing Maya to step safely onto solid ground for the first time since the flood began. She looked back at the path they had taken, seeing her home, the floating debris, and the rising sun reflecting off the water. Despite the destruction, she felt a quiet strength inside her. She had survived the first wave of the disaster, and she had learned something vital, that even in the darkest times, people could make a difference. The man prepared to move on, as if his work was never finished. He looked at Maya and said, "Keep what matters close, and stay alert. There will be more challenges, but you're stronger than you think." Maya nodded, understanding the meaning behind his words. He had arrived when she needed him most, not just to save her possessions, but to restore her hope. She felt a deep gratitude toward him, knowing that she would never forget the courage and skill that had brought her through the first day of the flood. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the water, Maya watched him disappear down the flooded street, his raft moving steadily through the currents. She held her small box of photographs tightly, feeling the comfort of what she had salvaged. She realized that while the flood had taken much from her, it had also given her something unexpected, a reminder of human kindness, resilience, and the strength that could be found in connection, even with a stranger. For the first time since the flood began, Maya allowed herself to breathe fully, to feel the mix of relief and anticipation. She knew the days ahead would not be easy, that challenges remained and that rebuilding would take time. But she also knew that with courage, determination, and the willingness to accept help when offered, she could face whatever came next. The cowboy's words echoed in her mind. We salvage what we can. And in that simple phrase, she found the wisdom to keep moving forward. Maya felt a mixture of relief and determination as she stood on the higher ground, holding her small box of photographs tightly against her chest. The floodwaters were still strong, but for the first time since the disaster began, she felt a glimmer of hope. She knew she could not stay in one place forever. Her home was partially submerged, and the rising waters threatened everything else she had left. She needed to move carefully, salvage what she could, and find a way to survive the rest of this disaster. The cowboy, whose name she had learned was Jack, gestured for her to follow.
"We move carefully," he said, his voice calm and steady.
There's still a lot of water, and it can be dangerous, but we can salvage what we can.
Yes, Maya nodded, trusting him completely now. She had seen his skill in navigating the floodwaters, his careful attention to obstacles, and the way he had guided her safely from her home. She knew that with him by her side, she had a chance to survive. They climbed back onto the raft, which had proven sturdy enough to carry both of them through the swirling waters. Jacques pushed it off the higher ground with a long wooden pole, steering them into the current with confidence. Maya held on tightly, keeping her balance as they floated past partially submerged houses, floating debris, and broken fences. The flood had changed the neighborhood beyond recognition.
What had once been streets and lawns was now a chaotic river, carrying away everything in its path.
As they moved, Jack began to explain the plan. "We go house by house if possible," he said.
We try to save what we can. Important belongings, supplies, anything that can help people rebuild later. Some of it might be gone forever, but we do what we can.
Maya listened intently, feeling a sense of purpose she hadn't had since the flood began. She realized that survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about preserving the things that mattered, the memories, and the small pieces of life that the flood could not take completely. Their first stop was a house partially submerged near the center of the street. The roof was just above the water line, and the current swirled dangerously around it. Maya's heart pounded as they approached.
Books, and even a small bicycle. Jack steadied the raft carefully, pushing away dangerous debris with his pole.
"We move slowly," he reminded her. "One step at a time. Safety first." Maya climbed onto the roof of the house, using a rope Jack had tied to the raft for support. She could feel the wood creaking under her weight, and she moved cautiously, taking slow, deliberate steps. Inside, she found a few items that could be saved: some books, a blanket, and a small bag of clothes. She carried them back to the raft, placing them carefully to avoid them falling into the water. Jack steadied the raft, his eyes scanning the current for hidden dangers. The teamwork between them felt seamless, as if they had been working together for much longer than a few hours. As they continued, they encountered more challenges. The floodwaters had uprooted trees, sending large branches and trunks floating past like logs in a river.
Jack used the pole to push them away, guiding the raft through narrow spaces between the obstacles.
Maya held on tightly, learning from his example. She began to anticipate the movements of the water, noticing how currents swirled around objects and how the raft responded to small waves. Each successful maneuver gave her confidence, and she realized that she was learning skills she never expected to need. At one point, they came across a small family stranded on the roof of their home. Jack called out to them, offering assistance, but they were hesitant, afraid to leave their temporary shelter. Maya could see the fear in their eyes, the same fear she had felt just a day before. Jack reassured them gently, "We'll get you out safely, one step at a time." With careful instructions, he guided them onto the raft. Maya helped steady the small children, making sure they didn't slip into the water.
It was a tense moment, but they made it safely onto the raft.
The family clung to each other, grateful and frightened, and Maya realized that survival was not just about physical skill. It was about courage, trust, and the willingness to help others. As they moved on, the floodwaters began to rise higher in some areas. The current became stronger and debris moved faster, increasing the danger. Jack's experience became even more apparent as he navigated these challenges with precision. He explained to Maya how to read the water, how to notice subtle changes in the flow, and how to anticipate where floating objects might drift. Maya absorbed everything eagerly, understanding that each lesson could save their lives. Despite the danger, Maya began to notice small signs of hope. Birds that had taken refuge on rooftops, patches of dry land, and even glimpses of neighbors who had survived gave her courage. Round and desperately had not taken everything.
Life was still present, still resilient, and she felt a renewed determination to face whatever came next.
They reached a part of the neighborhood where the water had submerged nearly everything. Cars floated past like small boats. Fences were gone, and trees had toppled over completely. The devastation was overwhelming, but Jack remained focused. "We keep going," he said. "There's still more to salvage." Maya nodded, feeling a sense of duty. She knew that while their efforts might not save everything, they could make a difference for those who had lost so much. Jack and Maya carefully maneuvered the raft to a house with a partially submerged attic. Inside, Maya spotted a small chest of photographs, family albums, and a few personal belongings that had survived the flood. She carefully retrieved them, holding them above the water to keep them dry. Jack steadied the raft, pushing away floating debris that threatened to collide with them. The sense of accomplishment was small but meaningful. Each item they salvaged was a victory against the overwhelming power of the flood. As the day wore on, they faced exhaustion. The physical effort of navigating the raft, climbing onto rooftops, and salvaging belongings was draining. Maya's arms ached, her hands were raw from gripping ropes, and her legs trembled from climbing. But the sense of purpose kept her going. Jack noticed her fatigue and offered words of encouragement. "Rest when you can, but keep moving. Every bit we save matters." Maya felt a surge of gratitude. In a world where everything seemed lost, his calm presence and guidance gave her strength. They encountered more people along the way. Elderly neighbors, a young couple with a newborn, and even a stray dog clinging to a small patch of dry land. Each encounter was tense. Each rescue required careful planning and execution. Maya found herself thinking less about her own fear and more about the lives of others. She began to understand that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. By late afternoon, the floodwaters began to show signs of slowing. The rain had decreased, and the current was less aggressive. Jack guided the raft toward a slightly higher area where several survivors had gathered. People were helping each other, sharing food and blankets and providing comfort. Maya felt a sense of relief wash over her. They had made it through the most dangerous part of the day, and their efforts had saved several lives and many belongings. As they settled on the higher ground, Jack turned to Maya. "We did what we could today," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But we saved what mattered. That's what counts." Maya looked around at the survivors, the salvaged items, and the small signs of hope amidst the destruction. She realized he was right. Breath. Survival was not about saving everything. It was about preserving life, dignity, and hope. Maya held her small box of photographs tightly, feeling the weight of what she had salvaged. She looked at Jack, grateful for his guidance and courage. Without him, she would have been alone, overwhelmed, and perhaps defeated.
His words echoed in her mind. We salvage what we can. They were simple words, but they carried a powerful truth about resilience, courage, and the importance of helping others.
As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the flooded landscape, Maya felt a renewed determination. She knew the days ahead would be challenging, that rebuilding would take time, and that the flood had changed her life forever. But she also knew that with courage, determination, and the support of people willing to help, she could face anything. She had learned to navigate fear, to act decisively, and to value the small victories that meant so much in a disaster. Jack prepared to move on, as he often did, ready to help others in need. He looked at Maya and nodded. "You're ready now," he said. "Keep what matters close, stay alert, and remember, you're stronger than you think." Maya watched as he guided the raft back into the water, disappearing into the currents. She felt a mixture of sadness and gratitude. He had been her guide, her protector, and her teacher in the midst of chaos. Maya stayed on the higher ground with the other survivors, sharing her story and helping where she could. She realized that while the flood had taken much from her, it had also given her something invaluable. A lesson in courage, resilience, and the importance of human kindness. The words Jack had spoken would stay with her forever. We salvage what we can.
And in those words, she found a guiding principle for the days and challenges to come. The sun rose slowly, casting soft golden light over the flooded neighborhood.
Maya stood on the higher ground, her box of photographs and a few salvaged items at her side, taking in the scene around her. The floodwaters had begun to recede in some areas, but the destruction was still evident. Homes were damaged, trees were uprooted, and streets had become rivers of mud and debris. Despite the devastation, there was a sense of calm in the air, a quiet after the storm. People were beginning to emerge from the few safe spots where they had survived, checking on neighbors, helping one another, and assessing the damage. Maya watched them carefully, feeling both sorrow for what had been lost and hope for what could still be saved. Desk. She remembered Jack's words from the day before. We salvage what we can. Those words had guided her through the chaos, giving her focus and courage. She realized now that they were not just about saving possessions. They were about saving hope, about refusing to give in to despair, and about acting even when the odds seemed impossible. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the cowboy who had appeared when she had been at her most vulnerable. Without him, she might have felt entirely alone, without direction or purpose. The survivors began to gather in a small clearing, a patch of land that had remained above the floodwaters. People shared food, blankets, and information. Some were comforting children, others were checking on neighbors, and a few were organizing small groups to start the cleanup. Maya felt drawn to help, despite her exhaustion. She had spent the past day navigating the flood, salvaging belongings, and learning survival skills. She now understood that she had grown stronger in ways she had never imagined, and she wanted to share that strength with others. As she moved among the survivors, she met the small family they had rescued the previous day. The parents were exhausted but relieved, clutching their children tightly. When they saw Maya approaching, they smiled warmly, gratitude shining in their eyes. You saved us, the mother said softly, tears welling up. Maya shook her head, thinking of Jack. We all helped each other, she replied, feeling the truth of her words. It was not just about one person's courage. It was about community, about human beings coming together in the face of disaster.
Maya spent the morning assisting where she could.
Round. She helped carry blankets and food to those in need, guided people to safe spots on higher ground, and shared tips she had learned from Jack on how to navigate the floodwaters safely. With each small act, she felt a sense of purpose and fulfillment. She realized that even though the flood had taken much from her, it had also given her the opportunity to contribute, to be part of the recovery, and to make a difference in the lives of others.
By midday, emergency teams had begun to arrive.
Brass. Trucks, boats, and helicopters appeared in the distance, bringing supplies and assessing the damage. Maya watched with a mixture of relief and admiration. Help was finally arriving in full force, but she also knew that the work of rebuilding would be long and difficult. She thought about her home, her belongings, and the life she had before the flood. Much of it was gone, but what remained, the memories, the lessons learned, and the strength she had discovered within herself, was priceless. As the day wore on, Maya found a quiet moment to sit and reflect. She opened the small box of photographs she had salvaged, carefully examining each image. Faces of family and friends smiled back at her, frozen in moments of happiness. Whoa. She felt a deep sense of connection to her past, a reminder of the life she loved and the people she cherished. Even though the flood had taken much, it could not erase these memories. They were hers to keep, and in that realization, she found comfort and peace. Maya thought again of Jack Dace. He had not seen him since the previous evening, but she knew he was out there, helping others, continuing his quiet work. He had come into her life like a guardian, appearing when she had no one else, guiding her through danger and teaching her the value of courage and hope. She felt a deep gratitude for him, and though she might never see him again, she knew his lessons would stay with her forever. As afternoon turned to evening, the survivors began to organize small groups to start cleaning up. Maya joined one of these groups, helping to remove debris, secure damaged structures, and guide people to safe areas.
It was exhausting work, but she felt a sense of accomplishment with every small victory.
Each item moved, each cleared path, each grateful smile was a reminder that even after disaster, life could continue and communities could rebuild stronger than before. The flood had taken many things, but it had also revealed something remarkable. The resilience of people, the kindness of strangers, and the strength that comes from helping one another. Maya realized that survival was not just about enduring physical challenges. It was about emotional endurance, about finding hope when it seems impossible, and about extending help when others need it most. She thought of the people she had rescued, the items she had salvaged, and the lessons she had learned, and she felt a deep sense of pride and purpose. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the water in the damaged neighborhood, Maya found a quiet spot to sit and watch. She looked at the small groups of survivors working together, the emergency teams coordinating efforts, and the patches of land that had remained untouched by the flood. The scene was a mixture of destruction and hope, loss and recovery. She realized that life, like the flood, could be unpredictable and overwhelming, but it was also full of moments of courage, connection, and resilience.
Maya thought back to the beginning, to the moment she had woken up alone, surrounded by rising water, with no one to help her.
She remembered the fear, the helplessness, and the overwhelming sense of isolation. And she remembered the arrival of Jack, the cowboy, who had appeared on a makeshift raft, offering guidance and support. He had taught her that even in the darkest times, help could come, courage could be found, and hope could survive. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for his presence, his words, and his actions. Night fell, and the temperature dropped, but Maya felt a warmth inside her that the flood could not touch. She had survived, she had helped others, and she had learned invaluable lessons about courage, resilience, and human kindness. She knew that rebuilding her life would take time, but she also knew that she had the strength to face the challenges ahead. The memories she had salvaged, the connections she had made, and the lessons she had learned would guide her through the days to come. Before resting for the night, Maya took one last look at the flooded neighborhood. The water had begun to settle, revealing the damage in stark relief. Yet, amid the destruction, she saw signs of life, people helping one another, small acts of kindness, and the first steps toward recovery. She understood that life would continue, that the community would rebuild, and that hope was not lost. She whispered a quiet thank you to Jack, wherever he was, for showing her the path through fear and uncertainty. In the following days, Maya continued to help with the cleanup, assist other survivors, and salvage what she could from the flood. Breaths. Each day brought new challenges, but also new moments of hope. She worked alongside neighbors and strangers, sharing stories, encouragement, and laughter. The flood had taken much, but it had also brought people together, creating a sense of unity and shared purpose. Maya realized that she was stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than she had been before. Months later, as the neighborhood slowly rebuilt, Maya reflected on her experience. The flood had been a test of endurance, courage, and human connection. She had faced fear, loneliness, and uncertainty, but she had also discovered resilience, hope, and the power of human kindness. She had learned that even when circumstances seem impossible, people can make a difference, and that small acts of courage and compassion can have lasting impacts. Maya kept the box of photographs close, a reminder of what had survived and what mattered most. She thought often of Jack, the cowboy, who had appeared when she needed help most, guiding her through danger and teaching her the value of hope and perseverance. His words, "We salvage what we can," had become a personal mantra, guiding her through challenges and reminding her that even in the darkest times it was possible to find light. By the end of the year, the neighborhood had begun to return to life. Homes were repaired, streets were cleared, and families reunited. Maya had grown through the experience, becoming more independent, courageous, and resilient. She had discovered the importance of community, the power of compassion, and the strength that comes from facing challenges head-on. The flood had changed her life forever, but it had also revealed the depth of human kindness and the possibility of hope even in the most difficult circumstances. As she stood once more on the patch of higher ground where she had first encountered Jack, Maya felt a sense of peace. The flood had tested her in every way, but she had endured. She had helped others, salvaged what mattered, and learned lessons that would stay with her for a lifetime. The memories of fear and helplessness remained, but they were now balanced by gratitude, courage, and hope. She smiled quietly, knowing that she had survived, learned, and grown stronger. Life would continue, and she was ready to face it, carrying the lessons of the flood and the memory of the cowboy who had taught her that sometimes all we can do is salvage what we can, and that is enough.